Quick question before we start. Has this ever happened to you? Payday comes, you feel good for about 5 minutes, and then a week later you check your account and think, where did it all go? Here's a harder question. If your income doubled tomorrow, would anything actually change? Or would your spending just quietly double right along with it, and you'd still be counting down the days to the next check? That's what this story is about. We tell true-to-life stories about money, discipline, and the small choices that quietly decide someone's future. If that sounds like your kind of channel, a like and a subscribe genuinely helps. This one might change how you see your next paycheck. Part 1. The Loop. Daniel was 23, and nobody would ever have called him lazy. He stocked shelves at a grocery store on the edge of town. Up before dawn, a 35-minute walk each way because the bus fare wasn't always worth it, then a full shift of lifting crates, restocking coolers, mopping up spills, and smiling at customers who barely looked at him. By the time he got home, his feet throbbed and his shirt stuck to his back. And at the end of it all, the paycheck barely stretched to the next one. He used to joke about it with his coworkers. "We're not working for money," he'd say. "We're working for groceries we can't even afford." Everyone laughed. Nobody thought it was really a joke. His apartment was one room above a laundromat. The window unit rattled more than it cooled, and on the hottest nights, he'd just lie there listening to it struggle. He slept on a mattress with no frame, pushed into the corner so there was room to walk. When it rained hard, a thin trickle found its way in through a crack near the window, and he'd stack towels along the sill and go back to sleep. Some weeks, dinner was optional, so bus fare wasn't. But the thing that quietly wrecked him every single month wasn't the rent or the walk or the aching feet. It was payday itself. The moment the money hit his account, Daniel didn't feel like a broke stock clerk anymore. He felt like someone else entirely. His phone would buzz. "Bro, we're going out tonight. You only live once." And he'd go. Drinks he couldn't really afford, a meal at a place he'd normally never walk into, a new pair of sneakers so nobody would guess how tight things actually were. For one night, he felt like he belonged, successful, ahead. He'd post a photo, smiling, glass in hand, like everything was fine, like he had it figured out. People would comment, laugh, tag him in the next round of plans. A week later, none of that feeling was left. Just an empty account and a long wait for the next one. He'd open his banking app out of habit, see the number, and close it again just as fast. Like closing it fast enough might undo it. Part 2. The Bread. One evening, walking home past a diner, the smell of something fried and warm stopped him cold. His stomach growled. He checked his pocket. Enough for a loaf of bread. Nothing more. He watched through the window for a second. People eating, laughing, not thinking twice about the bill. And then he just kept walking. That night he stared at the ceiling and asked himself the question that had been circling for months. I show up every single day, so why does nothing ever change? The next month played out exactly the same. Paycheck, spending, empty fridge, waiting. A loop with no exit. Part 3. The House on Ash Street. One Saturday, walking home as the sun dropped low, Daniel passed a rundown house a few streets from his own and heard shouting. A landlord stood in the yard, red-faced, furious. In front of him, a tenant stood frozen next to 2 duffel bags, everything his family owned. The man's wife was crying quietly. Their daughter gripped her mother's sleeve and said nothing. "You've had time," the landlord snapped. "You work every day, so where's my money? Pay up or get out." "Next month," the man said, his voice cracking. "I swear it. Just give me a little more time." "That's what you said last month, and the month before that." The landlord shook his head, unmoved. "You work hard. I've watched you leave for work every single morning, but you never plan. Not once in a year. Get out." A small crowd had gathered on the far side of the street, the way people do when something is unfolding that they can't quite look away from. Nobody stepped in. Nobody said a word. The daughter buried her face in her mother's side. Daniel stood frozen on the sidewalk. Something about those 5 words hit differently than they should have. You work, but you never plan. He looked down at his worn-out shoes, then toward his own tiny rented room, just a few blocks further. A thought landed hard and wouldn't leave. What if that's me in a year? 2 years? For the first time, it clicked. It wasn't just his paycheck keeping him stuck. It was everything he did the moment that paycheck landed. Part 4. The library. The next morning, instead of sleeping in, Daniel walked to the public library, a building he'd passed 100 times and never once entered. He wandered the shelves, unsure what he was even looking for, until one title stopped him. Building Wealth on a Small Paycheck. He almost put it back, half expecting some gimmick inside, some promise about a get-rich scheme he'd have to pay for later. But he checked it out anyway, and read the first chapter that same night, sitting on the edge of his mattress with the one working lamp in the room angled over the page. It didn't promise overnight riches or secret shortcuts. It didn't talk about luck or timing or being born into the right family. One line stopped him cold. A small income isn't your real problem. Having no plan is. He read it twice. It described his entire life in one sentence. Part 5. The Notebook. Payday came again. This time, when his friends called, he told them he was staying in. "What happened to you? Did you get old overnight?" "No," he laughed. "I just don't want my whole future to vanish in one weekend." That night, for the first time in years, he cooked his own dinner. Nothing fancy. Rice, a bit of vegetable, whatever was cheapest at the store that week. But it was his, and it was enough. He ate slowly at his own small table, without the noise of a club or the pressure to keep up with anyone. Afterward, he opened a cheap notebook he'd bought for less than $1 and wrote 4 words at the top of a page. Rent, food, transport, savings. Underneath, he started listing numbers, small ones, honest ones. For the first time, his paycheck had a job to do besides disappear. It wasn't dramatic. Some mornings he still wanted to sleep in. Some nights he still wanted to say yes to his friends. Once, standing in a shoe store, he almost bought a pair he didn't need, just because everyone else had them. Then he thought of that family standing on the sidewalk with 2 duffel bags and nowhere to go, and he put the shoes back on the shelf. If you're still here, don't just feel sorry for Daniel. Ask yourself, which one of his old habits is actually your habit too? Part 6. The Slow Climb. From then on, Daniel woke before sunrise. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He read a few pages before work, made his bed, ate something simple, and whispered the same 3 words to himself every morning, one day at a time. At the store, nothing about the job changed. Same shelves, same boxes, same modest paycheck. But something underneath had shifted completely. While coworkers spent their lunch breaks complaining, Daniel sat with his notebook, writing down ideas, savings targets, small plans for a future that didn't exist yet.
"You think a notebook's gonna make you rich?" one of them teased.
"No," he said, "but it might stop me from staying broke." Every payday became a routine. Rent first, only what he needed after that. Dinner cooked at home, something small set aside before anything else got touched. He kept the savings in a plain envelope tucked inside an old shoebox because he didn't trust himself yet not to spend it if it sat in his account looking spendable. Some months the amount inside was almost nothing, a few crumpled bills that barely covered a meal out. But he kept a second sentence from the book in his head. Never laugh at small savings. One day, they turn into real opportunities. A year in, for the first time in his life, Daniel reached the end of the month with money still sitting in his account. He didn't feel rich. He felt something steadier than that. In control.
His friends, meanwhile, were still living exactly the same way. Celebrate on payday, borrow before the next one arrived. One night they tried to pull him back out. "Come on, you've changed. You never have fun anymore." "I still have fun," he said. "I just also get to sleep knowing next month's rent is already handled." They laughed it off and left without him.
Part 7. Years later. Years passed. Daniel kept reading. Books on discipline, budgeting, small business, self-improvement. Waking early stopped being a discipline and just became who he was. Slowly, on the side, he started a tiny business. It wasn't glamorous. Some months it barely made anything. But he didn't quit, because he remembered exactly what the old loop had felt like, and he wasn't going back. His savings eventually became a down payment on a small plot of land at the edge of town. Nothing valuable looking, just a patch of dirt with potential. Years after that, the land became a small rental house, built room by room as money allowed, sometimes pausing construction for months at a time when the budget was tight. The rent from that house helped fund a second one, then a third. He never rushed it. He never borrowed money just to look successful, and he never took on more than the numbers in his notebook said he safely could. He built slowly, carefully, the same way he'd built the habit in the first place, one honest step after another. He still cooked at home. He still wrote in a notebook. He still planned every single paycheck. One afternoon, walking past the same house on Ash Street where he'd once watched a family get thrown out, he stopped and just looked at it for a moment. Not because he'd become famous or wealthy beyond measure, but because he no longer feared losing the roof over his own head. Part 8. The Keys. A few years later, Daniel finished building a modest home of his own. The day he got the keys, he stood alone in the empty living room and let himself remember all of it. The hungry nights, the paychecks gone in a week, the quiet fear that nothing would ever change. He looked around the empty room, closed his eyes, and just said, quietly, "Thank you." His mother visited not long after. She walked through every room slowly, running her hand along the walls as if she needed to touch them to believe they were real, pausing in the kitchen, then the hallway, then finally the living room, where she stopped and went quiet. And by the time she turned back around to face him, she was crying. "Mom, what's wrong?" She smiled through it. "When you were young, I used to lie awake worrying your paycheck would never be enough to give you a decent life." She looked around one more time. "I was wrong." He hugged her, and neither of them said much else. Some things don't need words. Years later, people in town didn't remember Daniel as the tired kid stocking shelves. They knew him as a straightforward businessman, a landlord who never raised his voice at a tenant going through a hard stretch because he remembered exactly what that family on Ash Street had looked like and exactly what it had felt like to almost be them. A lot of people believe a small paycheck is the whole problem. Sometimes it isn't the size of the check at all. It's the absence of a plan behind it. Two people can earn the exact same amount and end up in completely different places 10 years later, simply because one of them decided, quietly and without any applause, to stop treating payday like a finish line. Daniel's income didn't change first. His habits did. He stopped spending to look successful and started building toward actually being secure. He learned that wealth isn't built in a single payday. It's built one decision at a time, one saved dollar at a time, one repeated habit at a time, long before there's anything impressive to show for it. You don't need to earn a fortune to start changing your future. You just need to start being consistent with what you already have, because a paycheck can feed you for a month, but a good habit can feed you for a lifetime. So here's the real question. When your next paycheck lands, does it disappear again? Or does it become the first step towards something different? Tell us in the comments, what's one habit you're changing starting today?
If this one hit home, a like, a subscribe, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it would mean a lot. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.